A quick disclaimer before we begin, the PEMF podcast does not contain any medical advice, and the content provided is for informational purposes only. If you have any health concerns, please visit a healthcare professional. Welcome back to episode 21 of the PEMF podcast.
And today's episode is about PEMF and pets, because we all know, obviously, people can use PEMF, but can pets get the same kind of benefits that people do? And this is exactly what we're going to be going over in this episode. We won't really touch too much on horses in this episode, more kind of like pets, like dogs, cats, stuff like that. But we do have planned for a more horse kind of based episode in the future. But this might actually be some people's first time listening to the podcast, or maybe even hearing about PEMF. They might be thinking, they might have seen the title and gone, oh, how can I help my animals healing? So just very briefly, for anyone who might be new, what is PEMF?
So PEMF therapy, for anybody who doesn't know, is all about pulsed electromagnetic field therapy. And it's all about using magnetism from a system to help the body heal and to recover better from injuries.
So obviously we know PEMF can be used in people for a wide kind of range of things. But what do you actually see people maybe use PEMF on their pets for?
So just the same as humans, animals will benefit from PEMF therapy. And actually, sometimes they become a little bit more susceptible to the therapy. So they actually don't necessarily need a higher intensity device. So we'll touch on that later on. But a lot of the time, to be honest, we see with the pet market seems to be more kind of arthritis in the back legs in larger animals, larger dogs. We've sold a few systems to pet owners for cats, and again, seen great results with these. So there's no difference to PEMF for humans. When it comes to animals, you're still going to get the same benefits.
Is it mainly maybe older kind of animals you see use the therapy, or maybe animals recovering from surgeries and stuff like that?
So yeah, same with humans. People tend to turn to PEMF when they're in pain, which is a sad fact because, we'd rather people were using PEMF therapy as a preventative measure. But, with animals, it's difficult, especially when they're puppies, because, they're jumping around, they're sprightly, they're not showing any signs of pain. When dogs, for example, get older, they start getting slower, more sluggish. They start to show signs of pain. If you touch their back legs and they kind of yelp, then obviously it's only natural for the owner to want to try and help that animal. And a lot of the time people reach out to us when their dog is already in pain, and we try and look at the causes of that pain and apply a device to kind of help that.
So you mentioned kind of in the first little bit that animals are actually maybe more receptive to the therapy and obviously do still get the same benefits. But why are they more kind of receptive, or how are they more receptive to the therapy?
So there's been a number of PEMF studies done over the years, like over 7,000 different studies, and the majority of those are with animals. So as a natural progression of studies, it tends to start with animals before you get clearance to use new systems on people. Unfortunately, the animals seem to be the first line of defense, but good thing is we're testing a therapy, so something that's therapeutic to them rather than anything that's going to harm them. But what the studies were showing is that the animals are responding really well to PEMF therapy, and generally at a lower intensity and lower frequency. So when we're looking at things like non-union fractures or arthritis in the back legs of animals, they were seeing benefits quite quickly. And what they were finding is that the animals, it's a pain-free kind of therapy. So they are almost enjoying the therapy as well. So you can implement a mat maybe into the bed of the animal, and the systems that are out there tend to be lower intensity because of those studies that were done in the past to show good effects, with animals.
Okay, great. So then kind of saying animals might not need as high intensity systems as maybe people would need to kind of get to their end result.
Yeah, exactly that. And the other thing with animals is obviously they can't communicate as well as humans can. So there are PEMF systems on the market that are like 7,000, 10,000, 15,000 Gauss, which is super strong. And if a human lays on that, it's almost like it's kicking you in the back. putting an animal on a system like this, especially like a small dog or a small cat, is it's probably counterproductive. They're just going to freak out, and they're not going to want to sit on it, and they're not going to get the benefits from it. So there's no need to use such high intensities with animals. Using a lower intensity system is also really good for calming the animal down. So if they are in pain, then it's something that they tend to kind of fall asleep on and relax on. So yeah, definitely lower intensity systems seem to be the key ingredient for animals.
So you mentioned there about actually putting like an animal on some form of mat. Obviously, we know with people, the main kind of applications you see is like localized or kind of full body mats. What kind of application do you see for animals? Is it just full body mats, or is it just kind of localized stuff? What's kind of more common and do you see?
I mean, animals are unpredictable, so it's a hard thing to apply something to an animal, whether they're going to like it, whether they're going to sit still. All these sorts of different factors come in. The most effective that we get less returns of, or from client feedback, what they're saying is the easiest way to apply a PEMF device is in the animal's bed. So you can use, we have a number of systems that tend to be kind of small mats, and that can be put underneath the bed or in the bed, with a blanket over the top or something like that. Because it may not be the highest intensity system that you want to use. It might not be targeting the specific area that you really want to hit. But as an effective treatment, it's probably the most easiest to implement into that animal's life. So, I've got a dog at home. He spends 99% of his day in his bed, chilling, having the best life. We've got a little mat underneath his bed, and we can apply that to him once, 2, 3 times a day, and he's not even going to notice it's happening. There are systems out there that you can strap onto or apply to an animal. Some of them are kind of like collars, or there's ones specifically for bigger animals. You get like an elastic strap and you can put it onto their back and things like that. And they're great for targeting specific areas. But it's all up to your animal, really. Is your animal going to keep that on? Is it going to kind of scratch it off, or is it going to get caught in its kind of door system, get in and out of the house? So for me, the most effective way of doing it is with one of those mats and putting it in or under their bed.
Okay, great. So you mentioned like big and small dogs there. Obviously, people are going to have a wide variety of dogs. Will smaller dogs maybe need something different from a PEMF system that a larger dog might not need, or kind of vice versa?
Coming back to the last question, the easiest way to apply it is using one of those mats and a bed. So really, they don't differ a huge amount. What I would probably say is go with a larger dog. I would try and go for a slightly higher intensity option. So if you're looking at a couple of pet mats, and one of them, for example, is 10 Gauss and the other one is 50 Gauss, you might get away with that 10 Gauss one for a smaller dog, but I would recommend going slightly higher intensity with a 50 Gauss mat, because the biggest difference between intensity is the drop-off point. So the further we get away from that system, the lower the intensity is going to be. So if you think about a big dog sitting on a mat, by the time you get to its hind legs, you've lost a lot of intensity. So going for a higher intensity mat for a larger dog would be my recommendation. But again, not looking at these super high 1000 and above Gauss systems. It's just not necessary for animals.
Okay, great. So a lot of people now as well, they might even have a PEMF device themselves, or they might be looking at a PEMF device and kind of thinking, will my pet be able to use this as well? So if someone is to buy a device, can they put their pet on the device that's made for humans, or are there certain devices that are made for pets and certain devices made for humans?
So absolutely, and we got a lot of our customers sort of say to me that they use their human device on their animal. Effectively, between the frequency ranges, there's very minimal difference. A lot of the time, they use the same frequencies that you're going to be using on humans that you will be on the animals. Again, I wouldn't recommend putting an animal on a super high intensity system. But you tend to find, and a lot of our customers say this, that animals gravitate towards their mat. And, I've witnessed this myself. I'll get home, I'll lay on my PEMF system, And within 2 minutes of it being on, my dog is like snuggling up against my leg and trying to push himself onto my mat. So you can sense that he can kind of feel the energy coming from the mat, and they tend to really enjoy it, and it really relaxes them. So absolutely, if you have a decent device at home, the only thing obviously I would say to you is, the difference between cleaning different systems. If you are using one yourself, you don't really want to be putting loads of different animals on it. But that kind of comes down to personal preference and whether the system you've got is easily wipeable.
Okay, great. So we've kind of mentioned that intensity is the only major thing to look for, maybe when it comes to PMF and pets. Is there anything else you should be careful of? Like, can your animal overdose on the therapy? Are there any other kind of warnings that you would put around PMF and animals?
So there's no way with PMF. There's no way of overdosing on it. There's within reason. You would only really use a PMF system for maximum a couple of hours a day. There's no need to use it any more than that. Same with animals. If they're laying on a mat and they're using it, the benefits that it's going to have within the body of a human or an animal is going to have those changes, and then it's not going to kind of keep pushing, if that makes sense. It's just going to have those effects on the body, help recharge the cells, help increase ATP, loads of different things that's all going to benefit you, which isn't going to kind of like give you too much, if that makes sense. So it's not like taking 100 different tablets a day. It's all about the natural exchanges that happen within the body.
Okay, so is there any kind of devices for animals or pets that you kind of come to mind that you might recommend to someone, just kind of as a general kind of recommendation?
So again, I would say kind of look down the realms of a small pet mat, something that you think would fit into their bed or under their bed. That's the easiest one to apply. And at NewMed, we offer a couple of different variants, and we find that those ones tend to be the most effective and the easiest ones to get your dog to use. There's the OMI Mini Mat, which is from Oxford Medical Instruments, and that one is a kind of super low intensity basic system, but it seems to be working well for the animals. BioMag have a kind of a veterinary system, but we've actually had a lot of different end users using those at home. So again, it's not specifically designed for vets, but also for pets at home. Tends to be a little bit more expensive, but again, it comes in like a small pad kind of application. The Stellarate device that we talk about on this podcast is actually one that you can apply as it is. So that one has a strap, so you can apply that to kind of the back end of the animal if you want to really localize it and target it. But we're actually bringing out a smaller pet mat that will plug into the system by the end of this year. So another one to keep an eye on for your pets.
Okay, great. And obviously, all the products that we mention are linked in the description down below. And if you do have any other questions around PEMF and pets that we might not have answered in this, make sure to leave them on wherever you're listening on or on any of our social medias, and we'll make sure to get back to you and answer them maybe in our next PEMF Talk episode.
Thanks for listening to the latest episode of the PEMF podcast.